This is my true story. 30 years ago, my son vanished in a storm and never came home. The sea took everything I loved, or so I believed. I buried an empty coffin, I lit candles every year, and I spoke to the wind as if it could carry my words to him. But yesterday, there was a knock at my door, and when I opened it, my heart stopped. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from, and please share my story. It was the kind of storm people remember for the rest of their lives. The sky turned black before sunset. The wind howled like something alive, shaking the windows, ripping through trees. I told my son to stay home, but he wouldn't listen. He was 20 then, strong, kind, and always ready to help. The neighbor's animals were trapped in the low fields by the coast, and he said he couldn't sit inside while they drowned. I still remember his last smile at the door. It was quick, warm, full of the kind of bravery only youth has. He grabbed his coat, shouted something about coming back for dinner, and ran out into the rain. The hours passed slow. The rain turned into a wall of water, hammering the house like fists. I waited by the window, hoping to see headlights. Midnight came, and there was nothing. By morning, the world outside looked torn apart. Roofs gone, trees uprooted, roads missing under pools of dark water. The phone lines were dead. I drove as far as I could, shouting his name into the wind, until a fallen tree blocked the road. By noon, the police were already pulling vehicles from ditches. When they found his truck, half buried in mud near the river, my heart stopped. The door was open, the keys still inside, but there was no sign of him. They said the current must have taken him. I refused to believe it. I told them he was strong, that he could swim, that he'd survived worse. But even as I said it, I saw their faces, tired, hopeless, already certain. For the next 2 days, rescue teams searched the coast. Boats went out, divers went down, dogs combed the woods. They found his jacket caught on a branch, torn and soaked in salt water. That was all. No body, no footprints, no goodbye. The storm took him, and with him, it took the light from my home. I didn't sleep for weeks. I sat on the porch every night, watching the ocean roar in the distance, whispering prayers into the dark. People came to comfort me, to tell me to let go. But how do you let go of your own blood? How do you accept that the boy who called you Dad is now somewhere under the same sea he used to love? I kept his room the way it was, his shoes by the bed, his books on the shelf, his favorite shirt hanging behind the door. I told myself he'd need them when he came home. The news called it one of the worst storms in decades. The papers printed his photo for a few days. Local man presumed dead after coastal flood, the headline read. Presumed. That word became my curse. They never said confirmed, and that tiny gap between belief and proof became the space where my life froze. I clung to it like a fool. I told myself that as long as there was no body, there was still hope. Years passed, but that night never left me. Every thunderstorm dragged me back to it. Every sound of rain on the roof made my heart race, like he might come running through the door again, drenched but smiling. I used to dream about him calling for help, trapped somewhere, waiting for me. I'd wake up in sweat, rush to the window, only to find emptiness waiting outside. The storm ended, but it never really stopped for me. It lived in my chest, rumbling quietly every time I saw the ocean. I built my life around that silence, half alive, half waiting. They told me he was gone, but I could never bury a ghost. I didn't know it then, but the storm hadn't taken him. It had only hidden him, and 30 years later, it would bring him back to my door like a punishment I never saw coming. The days after the storm felt endless, like time had stopped, but pain didn't. The rescue teams packed up, the reporters left, and people went back to their lives. But mine had ended quietly in that storm. I stayed in that small house by the coast, staring at the road where my son's truck was last seen. The mud dried, the sky cleared, but the ache never did. Every morning I woke up expecting to hear his footsteps on the porch. Every night I went to bed whispering his name into the silence. The police came one last time with the official statement. No evidence of survival, they said. They gave me a file, damp, wrinkled papers that smelled like sea salt and failure. They wanted me to sign off, to declare him dead. I couldn't. I refused. I told them I'd wait. They looked at me with pity, that same tired pity people give when they think you've lost your mind. But I wasn't crazy. I was a father. And fathers don't stop waiting for their children, even when the world tells them to. The search volunteers slowly stopped calling. Friends stopped visiting. People avoid grief after a while. It makes them uncomfortable. I learned to live with that. The house grew quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears, filling every space where laughter used to live. I found myself talking to the walls, to his photo, to the ghost of the boy I used to tuck in at night. I told him about my day, about the neighbors, about the sea. It made me feel less alone, even if no one answered back. One day, the local church offered to hold a memorial. They said it would bring peace. I agreed, though I didn't believe in peace anymore. The ceremony was small, a few candles, a framed picture, a coffin filled with flowers instead of a body. I stood there while the priest said his words, but all I could hear was the ocean outside. When they lowered that empty box into the ground, it felt like they were burying my hope. Yet even then, a small voice inside me whispered, "He's not gone." I clung to that voice like a drowning man clings to driftwood. I tried to keep working after that, tried to live normally. But every time it rained, my hands shook. Every thunderstorm dragged me back to that night. The roar, the flash, the feeling of helplessness. Sometimes I'd run outside when it rained, thinking maybe the storm would bring him back the way it took him. But storms don't return what they steal. They only remind you how powerless you are. Years passed, but the grief didn't fade. It just changed shape. It stopped screaming and started whispering. It followed me everywhere. I'd see a boy on the street with the same walk, the same tilt of the head, and my heart would jump before my mind caught up. I'd follow strangers sometimes just to make sure. I knew it wasn't him, but I had to check. What if, just once, it was? There were nights when I'd wake up convinced I heard his voice calling from outside. I'd rush to the door barefoot, open it, and find only rain. The neighbors said I was losing myself, that grief had eaten my mind. Maybe they were right. But losing yourself is easy when half of you is missing. The world forgot my son. They moved on, built new memories. But I never did. I couldn't. My life froze the night he vanished, and I've been living in that same moment ever since. I stopped celebrating birthdays, stopped decorating for holidays. I stopped living, really. I just existed, between hope and heartbreak, between what was and what might have been. People say time heals. They lie. Time only teaches you how to carry the pain better, how to hide it behind small smiles so others don't flinch when they see you. But inside, you're still standing in the same storm, waiting for someone who may never come home. That's how I lived for 30 years, in a storm that never ended. The years that followed were long and cruel. The world moved forward, but I stayed behind, trapped in the same house that now felt like a museum of ghosts. His shoes were still by the door. His coat still hung on the hook. His room still smelled faintly of the cheap cologne he used when he thought no one noticed. I couldn't touch anything. Every object was sacred, a reminder that he once existed. People said keeping those things was unhealthy, but letting them go felt like killing him all over again. Each morning, I'd wake up and look at his empty chair at the breakfast table. I'd pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then stare at the steam rising from the one that would never be touched. The silence after that was heavy, not peaceful, but hollow. The kind of silence that eats away at you slowly, reminding you that you're the only one left listening. Some nights I'd wake up thinking I heard footsteps or the creak of the front door, and my heart would leap for just a second before reality settled in again. It was the wind. It was always just the wind. I became the old man people avoided, the one who lived with memories instead of people. The town pitied me. They'd greet me kindly in the morning, but I could see it in their eyes, the sadness mixed with discomfort. They didn't know what to say to someone who'd lost so much for so long, so they said nothing. The neighbors' children grew up, got married, had kids of their own. Life kept happening around me, but my life had stopped on one stormy night decades ago. Every birthday I left a candle by the window. I told myself that maybe he could see it from wherever he was. Maybe, if he was still alive somehow, the light would guide him back. It became a ritual, one that made people whisper. But I didn't care. When you lose a child, logic stops mattering. Hope becomes the only thing left worth holding on to, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The seasons changed, but inside the house it was always the same. The same bed, the same photos, the same air thick with memories that refused to fade. I'd sit by the radio listening to old songs he loved. I'd picture him as a grown man, try to imagine his voice deeper, his hair gray, his smile older. It was torture and comfort at the same time, the only way to keep him alive in my mind. I used to dream of finding him. In some dreams, I'd see him waving from a distant shore. In others, he'd be calling for me in the rain. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, certain that it was more than just a dream. I'd rush to the window, open the door, look down the road, but there was always nothing. Just the sound of the sea, mocking my hope. Time didn't heal anything. It just dulled the edges of pain enough for me to function, to keep breathing. I grew older, weaker, slower. My hands started to shake. My knees hurt when I walked. But the pain of missing him stayed sharp. It never aged. Every year I told myself this might be the year I finally stop hoping. But every year I found myself lighting that same candle, waiting for a knock that never came. The world forgot about him. His case file gathered dust somewhere in a police drawer. The papers that once printed his photo now covered stories about other lost people. But I couldn't forget. Forgetting would be betrayal. I promised myself that no matter how many years passed, I would remember, even if no one else did. By the time 30 years passed, I had become more memory than man. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger. My life had been reduced to one endless wait. I thought I'd die before I ever saw him again. But I was wrong. Because one day, when the sky turned gray and the rain began to fall again, there was a knock at the door. Slow, hesitant, familiar. And when I opened it, my world stopped breathing. Over the years, my life fell into a pattern. Not living, not dying, just existing between both. Every morning I woke up at the same time, even though I had nowhere to go. The house was quiet except for the sound of the waves outside. I'd sit by the window with my coffee and stare at the same road that led to the coast. I used to watch cars pass and wonder if one of them carried him, older now, maybe changed, maybe ready to come home. It became a habit, hope disguised as routine. I started walking every evening, always the same path, down the dirt road toward the old pier. It was falling apart, broken boards and rusted rails, but it was where he used to fish when he was a boy. I'd stand at the edge, looking out at the gray water, waiting for something, anything. Sometimes I'd talk to him out loud. People thought I was crazy, talking to the ocean, but I didn't care. The sea had taken him, so the sea was the only place I could still reach him. On stormy nights, I couldn't sleep. The wind against the windows made me restless. I'd light a candle, just like I used to, and place it on the porch. It was my way of telling him that I was still here, still waiting. The neighbors got used to it, the old man with the candle, standing in the rain, whispering to ghosts. I didn't mind their stares. Grief makes you stop caring about how the world sees you. The years blurred together. I counted time by seasons, how many winters I survived, how many birthdays I spent alone. Sometimes I forgot what year it was. The calendar lost meaning when every day felt the same. I talked to his photograph every morning, told him about the weather, the neighbors, the things he missed. It made the silence less heavy. His face in that frame never aged, never changed, frozen in time while I grew older, smaller, weaker. There were days when I thought about leaving, selling the house, moving inland, starting fresh. But every time I tried, something held me back. The ocean felt like the only connection I had left to him. If I left, it would feel like abandoning him again. So I stayed. I stayed for 30 years in that same small town, near the same sea that took everything from me. People moved away, The shops closed, even the pier started to crumble. But I remained, stubborn and faithful to a memory. Every Sunday, I went to the market, the same one we used to visit together. I'd buy the same bread he liked, even though I didn't eat much anymore. Sometimes I'd see fathers and sons shopping together, laughing over small things, arguing about prices. It hurt, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to remember what that felt like, to be needed, to be loved, to belong. I didn't have many visitors. Most of my friends had passed on, and the rest lived too far to bother. I got used to being alone. My days were simple: breakfast, walk, candle, silence. The sea was both my friend and my punishment. It kept giving me memories I didn't ask for. I saw him in the waves, in the mist, in the faces of strangers. Sometimes I even heard his laughter carried by the wind. I knew it was my mind playing tricks, but I let it. It was better than hearing nothing at all. Then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. I had gone to the grocery store for bread and tea. It was just another quiet day, like thousands before it. I didn't expect anything. I wasn't even thinking of him at that moment. I had stopped torturing myself with what-ifs. But as I walked out of the store, something caught my eye. A man was crossing the parking lot, carrying a bag of groceries. His posture, his walk, the way he turned his head, it all hit me at once. My heart stopped. For 30 years, I had been looking for his face in strangers. But this time, I didn't have to imagine. The storm that took him from me had finally brought him back. It was late when it happened. The kind of night that feels too quiet, too heavy, when even the air seems to hold its breath. Rain had started to fall again, slow at first, then harder, drumming on the roof like it did the night he vanished. I was sitting by the window, watching the storm roll in, the same old ritual I'd done for 30 years. The power flickered twice, and I remember thinking how the house looked older in the lightning, tired, like me. Then came the sound that made my heart stop. 3 knocks, slow, uncertain, real. For a moment, I didn't move. I thought maybe it was the wind, or my mind playing its usual tricks. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence. The knocks came again, heavier this time, deliberate. My hands started to shake. No one visited me that late. No one ever knocked on that door anymore. I stood up slowly, feeling every bone in my knees ache. The floor creaked under my feet as I walked toward the door. The candlelight flickered against the walls. The world felt smaller, quieter, like everything was waiting with me. When I opened the door, the wind pushed in cold and wet. Standing there was a man, soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to him, his face half hidden by the rain. He said nothing at first. He just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to remember who I was. I froze. The lightning flashed behind him, and for a second, I saw it. The scar on the chin, the same one from when he fell off his bike as a boy. My breath caught in my throat. My legs went weak. I gripped the door frame to stay standing. "Dad." The word came out quiet, cracked, almost unsure. But I knew that voice. I would know it anywhere, even buried under 30 years of silence. My heart slammed in my chest so hard it hurt. The sound of his voice broke something inside me, not in pain, but in disbelief. I had dreamed of hearing it again for so long that I didn't trust it at first. I thought maybe I had finally gone mad. But then he stepped forward, and the porch light caught his face. It was him, my son. Older, weathered, alive. I dropped the lamp I was holding. It shattered, glass spreading across the floor. But I didn't care. I fell to my knees before I even realized it. My mind couldn't keep up with what my eyes were seeing. He reached out and grabbed my arm to help me up, the same way he used to when he was little, when he'd pull me to the yard to show me something he'd built. His hands were rough now, colder, but the grip was the same. Familiar. Real. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We just stood there, staring at each other as the rain poured around us. The storm didn't matter anymore. The world didn't matter. 30 years of emptiness, grief, and questions were standing right in front of me, breathing, alive. I wanted to hold him, but I was afraid that if I did, he'd vanish again, like he always did in my dreams. When I finally stepped aside and let him in, he moved slowly, like someone walking through a memory. He looked around the house, seeing everything exactly as he had left it. The same photos on the wall, the same shoes by the door. Time hadn't moved here. It had waited for him. The rain kept falling outside, but inside, everything was still. My heart felt too full to beat, too heavy to carry. I didn't ask where he'd been, not yet. I just watched him sit down at the table, his chair, the one I'd never moved. He looked older than his years, like life had carved stories into his skin that I couldn't read yet. I wanted to speak, to ask, to yell, to cry. But no words came. Only one thought echoed in my head. The storm took him, and the storm brought him back. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at him as if I were looking at a ghost that had somehow learned to breathe again. My heart felt too heavy for my chest, beating so hard I could hear it over the rain. My knees trembled, my throat closed up, and I couldn't find my voice. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief. After 30 years of thinking I had buried my only son, he was standing right in front of me, alive. Older. Different. But still him. The same scar on his chin, the same shape of his eyes. Time had changed his body, but not the way he carried my blood. When he reached out and touched my shoulder, I flinched. Not because I was afraid, but because part of me didn't believe he was real. My skin burned where his hand rested, as if life itself had returned to that spot. His eyes were glassy, full of something I couldn't name. Maybe guilt, maybe exhaustion, maybe both. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken whisper. I wanted to ask him where he had been, how he had survived, why he had never called. But my words refused to come. My mind was too full of images. His empty room, his photograph, the candle by the window I had lit for 30 years. All of them collided with the man standing before me. He looked thinner than I remembered, older than he should have been. His clothes were worn, his hands rough and cracked. There was a deep sadness in the way he moved, like every step cost him strength. I could tell he had lived a hard life, a life far from home. His voice was calm, almost empty when he finally spoke. It was as if the years had drained him of everything but silence. I wanted to hate him for leaving, for letting me live in pain for decades, but the moment I looked into his eyes, all I saw was the boy I had raised, the boy who used to run barefoot through the rain, laughing. My hands shook as I touched his face. The stubble scratched against my fingers, and that small, ordinary feeling undid me completely. I fell into the chair behind me, tears spilling down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. He tried to steady me, but his own hands were trembling just as much. The rain outside roared louder, and the thunder rolled like the night he disappeared. It was as if the storm had brought him back, carrying him home through time itself. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was filled with 30 years of words we had both swallowed. My heart screamed to ask why he didn't come back sooner, why he let me bury a coffin without a body, why he let me grow old thinking he was dead. But I couldn't say it. I was afraid that if I did, the fragile reality between us would break, and he would vanish again, just like before. Every breath I took hurt. The room felt too small for everything I was feeling. The photographs on the walls seemed to stare at us, proof of the time he had missed, of the life that went on without him. I wanted to show him everything and nothing at the same time. My heart was angry, but my soul was grateful. My mind was filled with confusion, but my body wanted to hold him and never let go. It was the cruelest kind of joy, one mixed with pain so deep it almost felt like punishment. He sat down across from me, dripping water onto the floor. His eyes met mine again, and I could tell he was waiting for me to speak first. But how do you speak to a ghost who's come back to life? How do you find words for 30 years of emptiness? All I could do was look at him and whisper his name again, softly, as if saying it too loud might wake me from a dream. He gave me a faint, tired smile, the same one he used to give when he knew he'd done something wrong but wanted forgiveness anyway. At that moment, I realized something cruel and beautiful at once. Grief never ends. It only waits. And sometimes, if life is merciless enough, it gives you back what you lost. Not to heal you, but to remind you of how deep the wound really goes. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the sound of rain hitting the roof the only thing keeping time. I could see the battle in his eyes, something deep, heavy, fighting to stay hidden. He looked at the floor, his fingers twitching like a man carrying too much guilt. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, broken, but every word hit me harder than the last. He told me the truth I had waited 30 years to hear, but one I was never prepared for. He said the storm that night wasn't just bad weather, it was his escape. He hadn't been swept away. He had run. He confessed that he had felt trapped, tired of my rules, tired of small-town life, tired of living in the shadow of a man who never stopped working. He said he wanted freedom. I felt my chest tighten as he said it, every word cutting through the years I spent searching, praying, dying inside. He hadn't been taken by the storm, he had walked away into it. He told me he'd reached another town, far down the coast. He had no plan, no money, nothing but his anger. He worked odd jobs, changed his name, and never looked back. He said he convinced himself I was better off without him, better off thinking he was dead. That way, I wouldn't have to see what he became. I wanted to scream, to tell him what those lies cost me. The nights I stood in the rain calling his name, the years I watched the road waiting for footsteps that never came, the loneliness that never ended. But I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my throat closed, my heart too tired for anger. He kept talking, his voice shaking. He said he got married under his new name, had children, built a small business. And then one day, he saw a newspaper article, an old man by the sea still keeping a candle lit for his lost son. Me. That's when the guilt came back, heavy and unbearable. He said he couldn't sleep after that. Every night, he dreamed of the candlelight, the window, the sound of my voice calling him. That's why he came back. Not for forgiveness, but because he couldn't run anymore. I sat there, listening, not sure whether to feel relief or betrayal. He was alive, that should have been enough. But it wasn't. The truth felt crueler than death. All those years of mourning, the endless grief, I carried them because I believed fate had taken him from me. But hearing him say he chose to leave, that he had lived a whole new life while I died a little each day, it broke something deeper than any loss ever could. He didn't die. He just erased me. He looked up at me, eyes red, whispering he was sorry. He said he knew he had destroyed me, and if I told him to leave again, he would. I saw the fear in him, the same fear I once saw in his eyes as a child when he broke something and didn't know how to fix it. But this wasn't something that could be fixed. The years were gone, the life we could have had buried under time and silence. Still, I couldn't hate him. My heart refused to. Even in betrayal, he was still my son. I told him nothing. I just sat there staring at him, my mind replaying every second of the last 30 years. Every candle, every dream, every time I thought I heard his voice in the wind. And now the truth sat across from me, breathing, crying, alive. It should have brought peace. Instead, it brought a different kind of pain, the kind that stays forever. He said he'd understand if I wanted him to leave, that maybe he didn't deserve to be my son anymore. But as I looked at him, soaked and trembling, I saw the same lost boy I once held after every storm. Maybe the storm never really ended. It had just moved from the sky into both of our hearts. He lowered his head into his hands, shaking, his voice breaking with every word that came out. He said he hadn't stopped thinking about me since the day he saw that newspaper photo, the image of me standing by the sea, holding a candle for my missing son. He said it hit him like a punch to the chest, like a memory forced its way back into his heart and refused to leave. Every night after that, he saw my face when he closed his eyes. He said he would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing my voice calling his name from the waves. He told me that guilt had followed him everywhere, at work, at home, even when he laughed with his own children. Every smile he gave them was haunted by the thought that somewhere I was still waiting, still lighting candles, still believing in a lie. He said he couldn't look his children in the eye without seeing me. The man who raised him, loved him, starved for him, abandoned for nothing but the illusion of freedom. He said he tried to bury it, to tell himself he had no choice. But guilt is not something you bury. It follows you like a shadow that never fades. I listened quietly, my hands trembling on my knees. I wanted to tell him to stop, to save what little was left of my heart. But he kept going. He said there were nights when he thought of ending his life, when the silence of his own house became unbearable. He said his wife would ask why he sat by the window at night, staring into the dark. He never told her the truth, that he was waiting for forgiveness that would never come. He said every storm reminded him of the one he disappeared into, and every time thunder rolled, he thought of the pain he caused me. He said when his children asked about their grandfather, he told them I had died long ago. But one night, his daughter drew a picture for school, an old man holding a candle. She said she dreamed of him calling her name. That's when he broke. He knew it was me. He said it felt like my soul had found its way into her dream, like even the universe couldn't let him forget. That was when he decided he couldn't live another day without facing me, even if I hated him, even if I turned him away. He said he deserved nothing less. The guilt poured out of him like poison finally leaving the body, but it didn't cleanse him. It only showed how deep the wound really was. I sat there, silent, letting every word sink in. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I had no tears left for what was already gone. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him like I did when he was small, but another part of me wanted him to feel every ounce of the pain he had left me with. It was a cruel war inside me, love and anger fighting for the same heart. He looked up at me finally, his eyes swollen red, his face pale and wet from both rain and tears. He said he didn't come for forgiveness. He said he came because he couldn't die without saying sorry. He said he knew that no apology could bring back the years I lost, the nights I spent alone, the hope that killed me slowly. He just wanted me to know he finally understood what it meant to be a father, because losing me made him one. I turned my face away. I couldn't look at him anymore. The sound of rain on the roof was the only thing that filled the silence. My chest hurt, but my voice came out steady when I finally spoke. I told him guilt is a cruel friend. It stays longer than love. He bowed his head again, crying quietly, and I knew then that the storm outside wasn't the only one raging. It lived inside us both, and maybe it always would. After he spoke, silence filled the room like smoke. It crept into every corner, heavy and choking. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second sounding like a heartbeat that didn't belong to either of us. My chest felt hollow. My mind was spinning. 30 years of pain, searching, and hoping, all reduced to a few broken words and a confession that ripped through everything I thought I knew. I had imagined this moment for decades, but not like this. Not with guilt and pity sitting between us like ghosts. My body felt weak. The strength I had built from years of surviving grief began to slip away. I wanted to tell him to stop, to leave, to give me back the peace I had made with his death. But he just sat there, looking at me like a man begging for punishment. I could see the storm in his eyes, the same storm that had stolen him all those years ago. Only this time, it was inside him. He was drowning in regret, and part of me wanted to pull him out, but another part wanted to let him sink. My hands shook as I tried to stand. The room blurred for a second. He rushed forward to help me, but I stepped back. I didn't want his touch. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My heart screamed that he was my son, but my mind whispered that he was also the man who killed me slowly, day by day, year by year, with his absence. I looked at him and saw not just the child I raised, but the stranger who let me grow old, believing I was cursed by fate. It wasn't fate, it was him. He tried to explain again, to fill the silence, but every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. He said he had been young, foolish, desperate. He said he didn't understand what he was running from. But I did. He was running from me, from love that asked for nothing but honesty, from a home that gave him everything he needed but not everything he wanted. And now, after 3 decades, he wanted forgiveness for destroying the man who built that home for him. I couldn't hold it anymore. The tears came quietly, without warning. I covered my face, ashamed of my own weakness. He knelt beside me, his hands shaking, whispering that he was sorry over and over again. But every time he said it, the words sounded emptier. Sorry doesn't rebuild 30 years. Sorry doesn't fill the nights I sat alone, staring at the window, waiting for a ghost. Sorry doesn't erase the grave I visited every year, the one I built for a boy who wasn't dead. I thought about all the times people told me to let go, to accept that my son was gone. They said closure was peace. But what do they call this? When the person you mourned walks back into your life and proves that peace was a lie? I felt anger boil under my skin, but it was mixed with love, and that's what made it unbearable. You can hate a stranger, you can forgive a friend, but you can't do either when the person who broke you carries your own face in their eyes. He said he wanted to make things right, that he wanted me to meet his children, his wife, his new life. He said I could be a grandfather again. The words were supposed to comfort me, but they only burned. He wanted to give me a new family after erasing the old one. He wanted me to smile with people who didn't even know I existed. My heart couldn't take it. I told him to stop talking. I told him to leave. He hesitated, then nodded. He said he understood. I watched him walk to the door, his steps slow, heavy, the same as the night he left 30 years ago. The door closed softly behind him, but the silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the room and realized that nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He was alive, but the man I lost that night in the storm was still gone. When I finally sat down, I looked at the candle on the table, the one I had lit for him every year. The flame flickered weakly in the dark. I didn't blow it out. I just watched it burn, small and fragile, like the last piece of hope that refused to die. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet again, the same kind of quiet that used to suffocate me for 30 years. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of truth. The storm outside had passed, but the one inside still echoed in my chest. I walked to the porch and sat in the same chair I used to sit in every night, waiting for a son I thought the ocean had taken from me. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't the sea that swallowed him. It was his own choices. I looked down the road that led to the water. The same road he had walked down as a boy, barefoot, chasing the wind. The same road that took him away from me that night. I tried to picture him as the man I saw last evening, with his gray beard, tired eyes, and guilt carved into every line on his face. But my mind kept pulling me back to the young boy who used to sit on my shoulders, the one who laughed at the sound of thunder. That's who I lost. Not the man who came back, but the boy who never returned. The neighbors came by later that day, bringing food like they always did. They didn't know he had come back. I didn't tell them. Some stories are too heavy to speak aloud. I thanked them, closed the door, and sat with the candle still burning on the table. Its flame flickered faintly in the morning light, weak but steady, just like me. I had spent 3 decades keeping that flame alive for him. I thought when I saw him again, I'd finally be able to blow it out and rest, but instead, I found myself guarding it even more carefully, afraid that if it went out, I'd lose the last piece of what we once were. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing in the rain, his face full of guilt and fear. I wondered if he went back to his new life, to his wife and children, pretending again that the past never happened. Or maybe he sat awake too, staring into the dark, feeling the same ache I did. I didn't know which thought hurt more, that he was gone again, or that he might still be close but not coming back. Days passed, and life returned to its quiet rhythm. But something inside me had changed. The pain I used to carry felt heavier now, sharper. Before, I had lost a son to death. Now, I had lost him to choice. There's a difference. Death steals someone away. Choice means they walked away on their own. That truth cut deeper than the years of grief ever did. I stopped lighting the candle every night. Not because I gave up, but because I finally understood. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was surviving. Sometimes when the wind picks up and the sky turns gray, I stand by the window and listen. Old habits die hard. I imagine hearing footsteps on the gravel, a knock on the door, his voice calling, "Dad." But I know better now. If he comes again, I don't know if I'll open the door. Forgiveness doesn't always mean welcome. Some wounds need distance to stay clean. Now, the house feels smaller. The walls hold too many echoes. I started writing letters to him, ones I'll never send. I tell him about the garden, the changing seasons, how the ocean sounds softer these days. Maybe one day he'll find them, maybe not. But at least my words will exist somewhere, even if we can't. That's the only peace I can give myself now. People think time heals everything. It doesn't. Time only teaches you how to live with the pain, how to carry it without letting it crush you. My son is alive, and yet part of me will always live in that storm 30 years ago. Maybe that's where fathers like me stay, in the moment between losing and finding, between love and silence. Sometimes I still whisper into the wind, "I forgive you." Not because he deserves it, but because I need to. Forgiveness isn't for him anymore. It's for me. So I can close my eyes at night without seeing that door open again. And even now, after everything, a part of me still hopes that somewhere out there, he whispers back, "I remember."